The period between 1912 and 1922 saw a tremendous change in women's fashion. Fashions on the eve of war were long and slim. Skirts reached the floor and, in their most extreme, tapered towards the ankle in a hobble. As the decade progressed, skirts became shorter but also fuller. In seeming defiance of expected restrictions on clothing, skirts became very full in a style known as the war crinoline, which emerged as an effort to bolster the fashion industry. Despite the tremendous disruption that the war imposed on the clothing industry, particularly in Paris, fashion did not come to a screeching halt. The importance of the fashion and textile industries to the French economy persuaded authorities to allow couture houses to operate throughout the course of the war. These two purple dresses show the evolution of women's styles between 1912 and 1918. The long, narrow silhouette of the earlier dress gave way to a looser fit, lower waistline, and shorter skirt. This dress was worn to a wedding by the mother of the bride in 1912. This later dress was worn by Marion Heusner Crossan as her going-away dress in 1918. Hemlines for evening dress during the 19-teens were not simply floor-length, but actually pulled onto the floor in a train. In just a few short years, by 1915, hems had risen to the ankles. Hemlines for day and evening wear continued to rise through the teens and into the 20s. Ultimately, the volume of the skirts slimmed down as the overall silhouette became more cylindrical. The loose fit of this delicate cotton dress foreshadows the styles of the 1920s, but the dress's construction continues to depend on a fitted waistband and complicated underbodice. Not until the 1920s did the dresses, like this one, become simple tubes that could be pulled over the head. As the silhouettes for women's fashion became increasingly tubular, headwear became dynamic and oversized. During the first decade of the 1900s, hats were as wide as the body could support. The exaggeratedly wide brims fell out of favor during the course of the 19-teens, but the decreased width was offset by increased height. Bows and feathers shooting upward from the crown balanced out asymmetrical angular brims. The pompadour hairstyles from the turn of the century gave way to styles that were almost as large, but were parted in the middle and full at the sides and back. By the early 1920s, these styles deflated, and women began to bob their hair. The reduction in the size of the hair accompanied closer-fitting hats. The prominent footwear for the first 2 decades of the 20th century were boots. As skirts started to rise after 1914, boots began to give way to shoes. In particular, lace-up Oxford-style shoes replaced the boots for day wear. Evening shoes continued to be pumps that were often quite plain. Throughout the 19-teens, toes became extremely pointed, and into the 20s, the heel became higher and less curved. The 4 wedding dresses included in this exhibition mirror the changes in fashionable dress at the time. The silk tulle that was fashionable in the 19-teens was used in abundance in wedding dresses, and the hemlines were just as short as those of other dresses for day or evening. This dress, created from layers of tulle, features the flared skirt, which became popular at the beginning of the war. Mary Jane McConaughey of Mount Pleasant, Ohio, wore this for her wedding to John McKelvey on June 10, 1916. This columnar dress foreshadowed the straight silhouettes of the 1920s. Although the dress was probably ample enough to simply slip over the head, the underdress fastens with a complicated row of hooks and eyes starting at the left shoulder and extending down to the hip. Weddings during and immediately after the Great War took on a particular poignancy. Indeed, the tremendous loss of life among young men greatly reduced the marriage prospects of young women of that generation.